Hi there, welcome to Eddie's Research. As usual, I post an image of the previous article I released, which was about stablecoin. It's all about not cryptocurrency, but it's kind of electronic currency. It's quite interesting to look at if you want to have a look at it. So for this bit of research, I'm going to be looking at a universal basic income. The reason? Well, in the non-mainstream world, sometimes called the alternative or usually conspiracy theorists, there is an ongoing discussion or basically stating that the world will have the universal basic income and that if you don't agree with it, you'll be placed in detention centres and all your assets stolen from you. So I want to know a few things. Yes, I know many people will say it's true, but what I want to look at are a few things to help my understanding of it. First, I will briefly go over what it's all coming from. Then I will look at the main site and see what the statement says, but it may be small. I will look into as many official articles and videos to see if anyone actually proposes what the alternative view as reality. I will also look at any studies that are being or have been conducted to see what their research shows and how they went about it. And I will also take a quick glance at any places that already have it. That sounds a lot, probably is, but as with all research, it's needed. So on to the first. Where's it all stemming from? Well, at the World Economic Forum, which is the WEF, they have been promoting the Great Reset. I'm sure by now many people on both sides of the camp have heard of it. So, here it is. Great Reset. World Economic Forum. There's also a book written about it. Sure, there are books written by many people on this, but I prefer to go to the original author as they wrote it. It's called COVID-19 The Great Reset by Klaus Schwab, S-C-H-W-A-B, and Thierry Maleret, M-A-L-L-E-R-E-T. Now, Klaus actually started the WEF in the first place, so it's well worth a read. Have I read it? Yes, I have. I've bought it and I've read it. Now, not to spread assertions, but I wonder how many of the alternative people have actually read the book and not gone off the "it's all bad" videos. I have a feeling it's going to be pretty small. But for the actual Universal Basic Income, or UBI as it's most commonly known, it's not all stated in the book. To be honest, it's not a very large book, so they can't cram everything in there. So here it is. So WEF. There's a bit to read about if you want to. It was written in April 2020. I think it tells you something. There it is, April 2020. And here are some highlights. It is time to add a new element to the policy packages that governments are introducing, one we know but have abandoned, Universal Basic Income, UBI. It is needed as part of a package that will help us to get out of this yawning pit. The naysayers, and there are plenty, will point out that it won't work because no country can afford to regularly dole out money to every citizen. They will argue that we'll run unsustainable deficits which cannot be financed. Interesting. Because in the UK, the furlough system seems to have been brought about and everyone loves it. Money for sitting at home instead of working, 80% paid by the government, which will obviously be our taxes eventually. Awesome, many love this as it keeps the families above the breadline. Question is in the UK, what happens when the furlough system ends though? And it will. The pandemic that began in China has raged across Asia and beyond, exposing inequalities and vulnerabilities of huge populations in the region. This includes informal workers, estimated at 1.3 billion people, or 2/3 of the Asia-Pacific workforce, as well as migrants, with almost 100 million dislocated in India alone. If a large part of an entire generation loses its livelihood with no social safety net to catch it, the social cost will be unbearably high. Economic instability will follow the flare-up of social tensions. During these times when we need to kickstart sputtering economies, the payoff of social stability will be tremendous, making an even more powerful argument for UBI. Well, at the same time, when we actually have a look at this article, and of course it's still going on now, it's hitting India big time, and mostly in the areas where poverty is very high. So a new social contract needs to emerge from this crisis that rebalances deep inequalities that are prevalent across societies. To put it bluntly, the question should no longer be whether resources for effective social protection can be found, but how they can be found. UBI promises to be a useful element of such framework. Countries like the United States and Canada are already making such plans. Alaska, in fact, has been making annual UBI-type payments to every state resident for decades. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, cites the cat, pledged $2,000 a month for the next 4 months to workers who have lost income due to the pandemic, a short-term form of UBI. Now we need to expand it and make it work in the long term, and we can. So sorry about if you heard any noises. We have a cat. Isn't this the furlough system, or as close to it? I know in the UK they increased the universal credit. For those that have never heard of it, I'll explain what it is here in a minute, but I'm assuming most countries have something similar. So here's universal credit. Now I'm just jumping off script for the moment, but this is what the universal credit is all about. Universal credit is a payment to help with living costs. It's paid monthly or twice a month for some people in Scotland. You may be able to get it if you're on a low income, out of work, or you cannot work. Universal credit is replacing the following benefits: child tax credit, housing benefit, income support, income-based job seekers allowance, income-related employment and support allowance, and working tax credit. So here's the standard allowance. So if you can see it there, you're single and under 25, you get £344 a month. In a couple, it says £490.60 for you both. I'm not sure if that's for both of you, as in each of you get 490, or it's for, you know what I mean, for you as a as a couple, which I can't see it being, because if there were two of you and you're both under 25 and not working, that don't make any sense. It's like half the money that if you weren't actually involved with anybody. An extra amount, you may get more money on top of your standard allowance if you're eligible, and if you have 1 or 2 children, you get an extra amount for each child. So for your first child, there you are, you get £282 born before the 6th of April 2017, and after you get less. For your second child and any other eligible child, you get an extra £237. If you have a disabled or severely disabled, you get an extra 128 or 402. I'm not sure what that is. I assume that's a severely disabled. And childcare costs can go up to £640 odd. This is in a month. That's not per year. That's a month. So if you have a disability or health condition, you can see you get £343 a month there, and severely disabled if you're caring for somebody is £163. So as you can see, if you're in a family and you're out of work or on a low income, then you start off with a basic £344 if you're single and under 25, or if say a couple over 25, £596.58 for both. Then factor in that single person may have a child, add on say £282, sorry, but cannot work due to a disability, and add that £343 on. So that person may get 411 plus the 282 plus the 343, which is £1,000 a month, give or take. Now I know that this may not be for every person that's on it, but you can see the calculations and you see the screenshots, so you can kind of figure out where it's all coming from. Anyway, back to the topic in hand. So we're back here again, WEFM. To make UBI fly, we need fair taxation. Countries will have to work together, exchanging data across borders to stop people and corporations from evading taxes. Simply put, we must all pay our fair share. With a good conscience, we can no longer privatise a profit and socialise a loss. Then stop the subsidiaries, notably fossil fuel subsidiaries, which hinder the path to achieving the sustainable development goals, especially climate change targets. This would benefit us all while generating financial resources not just for UBI but also support affected fossil fuel companies. Now that's Agenda 21, in case no one's actually heard of it, this thing here. And if you haven't heard of it, I'll show you what it is. So this is Agenda 21. It was written back in 1992, and it's, again, if you go into the alternative world or the conspiracy theories, they'll all talk about Agenda 21. That's all coming to fruition in 2030. It doesn't actually tell you here. I think if you actually look at the article, it does tell you. The interesting thing, of course, as you've probably heard in the news many a time, we're going to get zero so-and-so by 2030, we're going to have this done by 2030, we're going to do this by 2030. It's always 2030, and you're probably wondering, why 2030? Why not why not 2040, why not 2050? Was because it's this thing. And if you actually look, here it is, and it's kind of like a bit void now, because I'm not going to go into too much detail. I've read this, believe it or not. God, I'm sad. But when you scroll through, it tells you, it tells you what they need to do it. Well, let's get to something where they're actually doing something. Where is so if you look here, for example, protection of the atmosphere, 9135. I don't know what page that is. Paragraph. So, well, let's just look at there. Right, so you got this one here. There's chapter 8. Tells you a little bit about it, what they need to do, what they need to achieve, and then they also put in the costs, which is usually quite useless, like 50 million. That's how much it would cost. $50 million. It wouldn't. It would cost a lot more than that. But if you actually read it, it's quite interesting, because you can go on both sides. You can always go on that it's going to be all completely negative, or you could look on the positive sides. But then what they haven't factored in is things like they want to promote female, so that females aren't exploited in like sub-Saharan places. But it's all fine and dandy saying that this is what they're going to do, but to do that they actually need to teach the males not to put down the females, if you know what I mean. Anyway, that's beside the point. It's another story for another day. So, interestingly enough, on the WF website, which we've just been reading, we have this. Do Europeans want a basic income? Well, apparently they all do. They all do. As you can read there. Now, I could look at polls and surveys till the cows come home. Why? Well, it's based on a few things. Who the survey was conducted by. I don't actually tell you on this one. There, Dahlia Research. Who they affiliated with. How many people were polled? And what were all the questions exactly? I may look at this kind of thing later on at the end. It depends on my sanity. So, for example, here there was only 11,000 people surveyed across 28 countries in 2017. So obviously, actually, we were still part of that, I think, at that point. So they asked 11,000 people, 21, across 28 countries. But I'm guaranteed they probably asked a bit different questions than this. They don't ask these exact questions. Probably said if you're going to be completely out of pocket, would you want a basic income? And they'll go, yeah. So at the very end of this page, where is it? There. It says a key complicating factor with implementing UBI beyond its fiscal cost is that it would not arrive in a vacuum. It would need to fit into and complement the existing set of social programs, both insurance-based and needs-based. Any rules would be needed to prevent double dipping of benefits. Moving to such a system would need to ensure that the incentives to have a job remain intact. This is relatively simple to do. A UBI should be sufficient to sustain the person at a modest minimum, leaving sufficient incentives to work, save and invest. Finally, good arguments can be made for having very selective conditions. For instance, some that may relate to public goods like vaccinating all children and ensuring they attend school. Such selective conditions would not undermine the main purpose of eliminating poverty and allow low-income people to take calculated risks to try to lift themselves out of poverty. Now, if you note a few things there, incentives to have a job remain intact, selective conditions like public goods, vaccinating, school attendance. So this is what I think is where the alternative side have found, and reading into it, that you don't get UBI unless you do those criteria. But I can't spot the part about taking your assets. Maybe I can find it later on. Now, let's look at any countries that have trialled it or in the process of setting it up. Oh, before we get there, I found this. Now, it's from 2017. Explains a lot more about the setup. You can scroll through that to your heart's content. It's quite lengthy. It's well worth the read, like I say. But near the middle, I was reading about people not choosing to work, as the people that work will be taxed for the UBI, but I think from what I can gather your tax goes up a little, but you still get the UBI, which will be more than the actual tax. A lot more. I'm not exactly sure where I found it now. But basically that's what it would be. Oh, and those with more money, the higher millionaires and billionaires, will pay more tax. Bill Gates getting taxed the hilt? Well, he would be, except he's now getting divorced. The couple will still do the work together, but they'll only be split, and I bet they split between the kids as well, so don't expect Bill to pay as much. Rather coincidence that his divorce came up now? Yeah, right. So for those not choosing to work... But what about people then choosing not to work? Isn't that a huge burden too? Well, that's where things get really interesting. For one, conditional welfare assistance creates a disincentive to work through removal of benefits in response to paid work. If accepting any amount of paid work will leave someone on welfare barely better off or even worse off, what's the point? With basic income, all income from paid work after taxes is earned as additional income, so that everyone is always better off in terms of total income through any amount of employment, whether full-time, part-time or gig. Thus, basic income does not introduce a disincentive to work, it removes the existing disincentive to work that conditional welfare creates. So they have a couple of images on the website. I've just put them here so it's easy to see. Nation A does not have a basic income. There's 80 jobs and 100 people. So you can kind of see it. Apparently everyone's all happy on the bottom, but miserable on the top. I think. I can't remember. But there you go. There's a graph that explains everything, if you can actually understand it. Anyway, back to the trials. Okay, so Germany is set to trial the universal basic income scheme. And it's a 3-year study, I think. It started in 2020, and yeah, so it's a 3-year study. There you are, 3-year study. The main bullet points. Starting this week, 120 Germans will receive a form of universal basic income every month for 3 years. The volunteers will get monthly payment of €1,200, I don't know what that is in pound, as part of a study testing of a universal basic income. The study will compare the experience of the volunteers with 1,380 people who do not receive the payments, and supporters say it would reduce inequality and improve well-being, while opponents argue it would be too expensive and discourage work. Sorry, the cat's going through it again. All participants will be asked to complete questionnaires about their lives. Where's that said now? There it is. Lives, works, and emotional state to see whether basic income has had a significant impact. So that's a long trial. So that's a long trial. We'll hopefully see the outcome. So if my sanity is still intact, I'll check it out in 3 years, see what the result was. So this one is about Spain. This one's a bit different. This is only for 850,000 households of the nation's poorest families. And this is Finland. Finland did one. They got the results in. Finland left people happier but jobless, so they don't want to work. They're quite happy having loads of money, but they don't want to work. So there you go. Sorry about the meowing if you hear anything in the background. I have a cat that's more vocal than a politician. So he's just meowing constantly no matter what. Constantly, it drives you mental sometimes. Also, if you look at the bottom of the nature one, the one we saw earlier on, it says down here that several other countries have experimented. So there's other countries, even Scotland, are discussing it, and I'm pretty certain that England will be, just they haven't said it yet. So there you go. Hang on a second. So sorry about this. The cat, it's a new one, so I've got to keep stroking him. So if you look at the bottom of the Nature website, it talks about this money for nothing. The idea of UBI isn't new. The English philosopher Thomas More proposed such an idea in the novel Utopia in 1516, although it wasn't until the 60s and 70s that economists began to think more seriously about how it could be applied. the US economist Milton Friedman proposed an idea relating to a UBI called negative income tax in 1962, in which those earning under a certain amount would receive supplemental funds from the government rather than paying tax. The United States and Canada conducted pilot studies in towns and cities on negative income tax and guaranteed annual income respectively during the 70s. The wave of conservatism that swept through governments in the early 80s, however, ended interest in these policies, with one notable exception. Since 1982, the state of Alaska has distributed profits from oil extraction in Prudhoe Bay to all citizens of the state, regardless of age, employment status, or other restrictions. I have no idea what would happen when the oil just runs out, or Alaska going to be absolutely knackered and they're going, oh God, I'm sorry guys, we've got no more money because we've got no oil, or we can't use oil because we're not supposed to be using oil, aren't we? But there you go, that's for another day. So, yes, Alaska's been doing it for years, and that economist Milton Friedman proposed an idea relating to UBI called negative income in 1962. So let's have a look at that. So here it is in Wikipedia, the website that anybody can edit, but actually nobody can really edit, and it's all completely truthful. Just like an encyclopedia. No, wait, no, because anybody can edit it, so it's not really truthful. Anyway, in economics, a negative income tax is a system which reverses the direction. The direction in which tax is paid for income below a certain level. In other words, earners above that level pay money to the state, while earners below it receive money. So it's not something new. And this is something I wanted to also find, as from what you read in the alternative media, it's just appeared out of thin air, only from the Great Reset, and all because of COVID-19. It's not. Sure, it's become more known, as many around the world have seen, or have been, and some still are, on furlough, and this seems like a good way to help those in the future. Also, I have a theory on how it makes sense. Here we go. So, person A has no job, but gets his UBI of £1,000 by default. He doesn't work at the moment, but claiming loads of benefits for a wide range of things. Those benefits cease when UBI kicks in, and even if there is a pandemic or war or whatever in the future, he's sorted. But he doesn't want to work. That's fine. He can have the £1,000, and after taxes, bills, car use, etc., can save the rest. Person B has no job like person A, but he wants to work because he's bored and likes to be active. But he can't find one that he would enjoy so he can live. For person B loves to work with his hands and wants to help out on farms, but minimum wage is way too small. Person B gets his UBI of £1,000, does the farm work, enjoys his life and has money still to live. And then person C has a job, well paid, or at least £20,000 a year. He gets £1,000 extra from the UBI, but he's still on low income, so pays less tax. But he uses the UBI money for paying his bills and then going to the pub or buying that new TV he always wanted. And he saves the monthly wage from his job as he wants a house but could never save for it before. Now at the very beginning I mentioned that all your assets will be stolen if you don't accept this. Now it's taken me a while of searching the WF website, of which I couldn't find anything that states that the assets will be seized or stolen. The only thing I actually found was relate to gold on a completely different site, nothing to do with this at all, but here we go, I'll show you it. The cat's now gone to sleep, just in case you're curious. I've just been stroking his head and he's dropped off and he's never going to wake up again from the wow. So here it is, in gold and silver confiscation, can the government seize assets? It's a decent read, it's quite a lengthy one as you can see. It's all about gold, but I've got some patterns. See any patterns here? Were imposed by the Western governments, advanced societies among the richest countries on the planet, and they all confiscated gold. Arose out of economic crisis. Each government had abused its finances so badly that it eventually nationalised privately held gold from citizens. It lasted for a long time. Of these confiscations from advanced economies, the shortest was 13 years, and completely forbid any type of hoarding. Only true collectors were exempt, and only those places were truly classified as rare. Anyway, so I'm going to wrap up this research on this one. I can see the good and bad points regarding UBI. As you saw, the three scenarios I gave are ideas that actually do make sense, and I think most people, whoever you are, will be able to sort of put yourself in one of those categories. Either you're the person who doesn't want to work for whatever reason, or maybe you just can't because you've got a certain disability or something, then you've got that. You might be the person that wants to just help out in the community. You want to help out, but you're not going to be earning that much by doing it, so you're really kind of scraping the barrel. But they give you the extra 1,000, think, right, okay, now I can go off and help the community. And then you got the other people who, no, I'm not talking about the millionaires. I'm talking about the normal workforce, are completely killing themselves every day doing overtime till the cows come home. Thinks, you know what? I don't need to do overtime now. I get this £1,000, or I can do overtime, get a bit of extra money, save it all, and hey presto. Anyway, also don't forget that what most people will do with the extra money is buy stuff. Anything. I'm just the same. I've been paid, I have a bit extra left over. I buy that book, that CD, that film, whatever. If I had £1,000 or so extra, sure, I would save it. But then maybe I could have a splurge in town or online. And that puts money back into the economy. And that's the key. You got to remember that if you give £1,000 to everybody, they're not all going to go, as in everybody, 100% of the population go, good, I'll save that in a savings account. They're not going to do it. Most people wouldn't. If you win £100 or £200 in the lottery, you probably think, let's go to the pub. Now the pubs are starting to open, or have a meal, or we'll buy that widescreen TV. Obviously not with £200, but you know what I mean. That sort of thing. And people will. And when you put money back into the economy, it comes back into the treasury and it comes back out again. So it's not really the same as furlough system, which is where people are just slacking it off. But not slacking off. No. Anyway, hopefully you've enjoyed this bit of research, and as usual, if you can try to look up in things in detail before you go off the he said, it's bad, good, etc. route, it's always a good thing. But obviously, not everyone can. I've said this before. If you were to look at any article or any thing in the news or whatever, you'd be there for your life just reading about it instead of actually doing anything for whatever. Anyway, thanks for watching, and yeah, thank you. Okay, goodbye.